What's up YouTube, it's GhostRider15 here, back at it again with another GOAT format video. And today's video is going to be a tier list of the best spell cards in the format. So as you can see, I have it categorized by S, A, B, C, and D. So yeah, without further ado, let's just jump right into the video. Starting off with Snatch Steal. So Snatch Steal is a card that is very good. Obviously it steals games, it steals monsters, no pun intended. The card is very good in simplified game states where you just need a really good top deck against an opposing BLS or an opposing Chaos Sorcerer, you know, just any boss monster that is too hard to get rid of. And it just swings the momentum in your favor as well. Sure, it gives the opponent 1,000 life points, but that doesn't really matter usually. It's way better to plus by taking your opponent's monster and winning the game with that. For sure, I think it's A tier. I wouldn't say it's like S tier, but it's somewhere in the top of A tier. Next up is MST. MST, I think, is a really solid card in most matchups. It's a little weird in the Chaos Turbo matchup because, you know, everything is chainable, so it's not the greatest card in that matchup, but still very nice to get rid of cards like Royal Decree, Gravity Bind, Level Limit, Area B, you know, those really annoying cards that some players like to play. And, you know, it's just a solid one of that you should at least be playing in your side if you're not maining it. I think it's A tier. So next up is Pot of Greed. Pot of Greed is a Trinity card, and it's always going to be a +1. The only time this card is ever bad is if it's like one of like the last 5 or 4 cards left in your deck. But other than that, this card's amazing. It's almost never going to backfire. And it's the easiest card to get a +1 off of. Like, literally all you have to do is activate it and there's your +1. You don't have to do anything crazy, anything special. So I consider it to be the best Trinity piece in GOAT format, but I know a lot of people disagree. But I think it is the best one, in my opinion at least. So I'm putting it at the top of S tier. Alright, so next up is Metamorphosis. So a lot of GOAT decks play this because, you know, it combos really well with the GOAT tokens. You're able to get a nice Thousand Eyes Restrict to steal monsters and stall you out. Also, it's really good in the Reasoning Gate deck as well. You can make a lot of really nice monsters with this card, like Gatlin Dragon. You can make King Dragoon. Both are really solid cards. You can also make Balter to shut down spell cards, and Ryu Senshi is also really nice to stop trap cards. So yeah, I think this card is nice. I wouldn't say it's like S tier, but I think it's A tier. Alright, so next up we have Reasoning. Reasoning is a card that's only played in Reasoning Gate Turbo. Because it's not really good in anything else, because, you know, you don't want to just randomly hit like Breaker off the top of Reasoning, or like you know, just like any random flip monster like Dekoichi or Magician of Faith. It's not, those aren't really good targets that you want to be special summoning. You want to be hitting cards that actually do something on summon, like Demok, Jinzo, Sacred Crane, and those monsters are usually just good in Reasoning Gate. So yeah, it's still a very good card, don't get me wrong. I just don't think it's like S tier or A tier. It's more like B tier, somewhere in the high B tier. Alright, so next up is Upstart Goblin. Upstart is a card that originally wasn't played in GOAT format that much. Back in like 2005, nobody played Upstart. Even during like the revival era, like in 2012, and all the way from like 2012 to like 2018, 2018 or so. Nobody was playing Upstart. Everyone thought it was bad because of the whole life points matter argument. And you know what? A couple of players, such as myself and a few others, decided that life points don't matter. And we ended up being right. The card's just way too good to not play in Chaos Turbo. You can play it in like Go Control with main deck Decree. The card's great. Like I said, the life point thing is rarely gonna matter. The consistency is just much better. So yeah, I think Upstart is A tier. Alright, so next up is Mind Control. Mind Control, I think, is very, very broken in the side. It's a card that for a long time I was playing it as a 3 of. I don't know if that's correct. Maybe it is better to just play 2. But still, the point stands that the card is very, very broken against decks like Chaos Turbo. But I don't agree with putting this card in the main simply for the fact that I respect the Warrior matchup way too much to ever do something like that. Like, unless I know I'm playing against nothing but Turbo, guaranteed, then sure, I think it's fine to main it. But if you're going into a field of the unknown, where you really don't know what you're going to play against, I would definitely not be maining Mindcon. But it's still a very good card. I'm going to put it in A tier because the card just wins games sometimes. Alright, so next up is Graceful Charity. Graceful Charity, I think, is the second best Trinity card in GOAT format. Right behind Pot and right above Duo. The reason being is that Graceful Charity does plus really hard with cards like Night Assailant, Sinister, or Thunder Dragon, but it does require you to have those cards first before you can actually plus off of this card. So if you don't have cards like that, then Graceful Charity is just a 1-for-1. It's not going to be a +1. I mean, it's still very strong, don't get me wrong. There's not that many cards that are actually better than Graceful. Like, being able to draw 3 and discarding 2 is insane. So I still think it's S tier. Alright, so next up is BrainCon. So BrainCon's a weird one because, like, there are situations where it can be really nice, like being able to like steal monster tribute for like Mobius or Jinzo, you know, get your +1 off of that. And I do like that it does get rid of the problem. Even in like the Chaos Turbo matchup, you can get rid of like Sorcerer or BLS just by banishing themselves. But with that being said, there's a lot of situations where it's a very bad card. For example, against Turbo, if your opponent's going set monsters, they go set cards like Dekoichi, Magician of Faith, they set Spy. You know, the card's not really that good because you can't really do anything with it because you can't target face-down monsters. And if you're going to wait for them to actually flip the monsters, by that time they've already plus with their flip monsters, so it's not that bad. Yeah, I don't think it's a very bad card or anything like that, but it's not insane, so it's like B tier. Alright, so next up is Nobleman of Extermination. So I gave this card a try for a while. I used to play it like a few years ago in the side. There are situations where it's nice, especially against like the Warrior matchup because they set so many cards and you need to get through that back row somehow, some way. You know, they have like Sakuretsu armors, they have Ring, they have Mirror Force, they have all these trap cards protecting their Blade Knight. But Nobleman of Extermination makes it a little bit easier to get through the back row and make it so that your Zombiros actually do something. But it does require so much side deck space to do that, and that can be a problem sometimes, especially if you're playing in a tournament where you're not sure what everyone's going to be playing. I don't think it's like the worst spell ever. There's a lot of other spells that are a lot worse, but it's a bit mid. So I'm gonna say C tier. Alright, so next up is Heavy Storm. Heavy is a card that you should always be respecting. Well, not always, but usually. And the card makes it so that people just don't blindly set 5 without any like solemn judgments. Because if you do that, you're just gonna get blown out. And I think this card is very healthy for the game. I think it's a good idea to keep this card in the format, because if people are not going to respect it, then we just have this chaotic format where people just like to set everything. And you know, I don't like that type of play style. Yeah, so I think just because of this card being a card that everyone has to respect, I think it's A tier. Top of A tier for now. Alright, so next up is Reinforcement of the Army, Rhoda. This card is played in a lot of aggressive decks like Warriors, Earth Aggro, because it gets them all their really strong monsters such as Blade Knight, such as Ninja Sasuke, Donzalug, and in Earth Aggro they get their Goblin Attack Force. And this card's insane because it doesn't lose to Trap Dust Shoot. It's a spell card, so they won't be able to return it back to the deck. Also, it's also really nice because it thins out your deck. So you're gonna see like Trinity pieces faster by thinning out the deck. And just the fact that Rhoda becomes any warrior monster that you want. So whatever situation you're in, Rhoda can help you out. If you need to get rid of a card from your opponent's hand, go for Dawn. If you need to banish a monster, go for DD Warrior Lady. If you need to destroy a monster, then you go for Exiled. If you need to hit a flip monster that's set, you can go for Blade Knight or Mystic Swordsman. So this card is so versatile. So I think it's an A tier card. Alright, so next up is Giant Trunade. Trunade is a card that is played in very toxic decks in this format, such as Reasoning Gate, Cyberstein, OTK, DMOC, FTK, what else am I missing? Empty Jar, Library FTK. So you know, all these like very toxic, annoying decks like Panda Burn, Rescue Cat, OTK. It's very good in those strategies, but if we're talking about in general, the card's not good in like Chaos Turbo. It's not good in Warrior. It's not good in like Chaos Control. So in a very like fair, balanced game, the card's not really that good. But if you're trying to just play something very like toxic, then yeah, you should be playing this card. But just because I feel like it's limited to like toxic decks only in this format, I think it's like a B tier card. We'll put it at the top of B tier. Alright, so next up is Delinquent Duo. So I know a lot of players think Delinquent Duo is really annoying. It's a very strong card, and don't get me wrong, it is very strong. I think it's very annoying at times as well, but it is not as good as Pot or Graceful Charity. This card is the weakest of all three Trinity cards, for the reason being that the longer the game drags out, the worse Duo gets. And some games it's going to be dead by turn 2. Like for example, if you're playing against Warrior and they go Blade Knight set 4, set 5, Duo's already a dead card. So yeah, I don't understand this whole ban Duo thing that I've been hearing from people lately. I think the card's perfectly fine. And even against like Chaos Turbo, like if you Duo, there's a chance that they have Sinister, or they've already resolved Thunder Dragon, or they have Night Ascendance to get back another flip. So the card's not even that bad, to be honest. It's only really strong against like Cancer decks, like those toxic decks that I mentioned earlier. which I think is good for the game. You know that you're able to Delinquent Duo all their really annoying cards that they have. So yeah, I think Duo is S tier, the bottom of S tier. Alright, so next up is Nobleman of Crossout. Crossout is a staple in just about every deck. You need it for cards like Magician of Faith, Decoichi, Spies, which are a card that is very annoying for aggressive decks to deal with, so Spy really helps with that. And it's one of the few ways to actually deal with flip monsters. And I think it's always going to be a staple. This card's never going to go away in GOAT format. It's solidified itself as a staple since the format started in 2005. So I think it's A tier. Alright, so next is Swords of Revealing Light. Swords, in my opinion, is a very overrated card. I think it's only amazing in decks like Reasoning Gate or like Rescue Cat, just for the fact that you play giant Trunades and you can recycle it. But other than that, I don't think the card is that good. I've seen players side this card against like Warrior, and honestly, I don't think it's that good. From what I've seen, it's not that good. Like, sure, you prevent them from attacking for 3 turns, but you're not getting rid of the problem. That's a similar problem that Phoenix Windblast has, that you're not getting rid of the problem. And once your Swords is gone in 3 turns, you basically just went -1, and you still have to deal with that Kaiku, that Blade Knight, that Mystic Swordsman, or whatever it is. And yeah, just for that simple fact, I think that this card is very overrated. I'm gonna put it in C tier. Alright, so next up we have Premature Burial. So Turbo doesn't play this because there's not that many good cards to bring back, but Reasoning Gate plays it because there's a lot of good cards that you can bring back. This card just steals the game in those type of decks. Just bringing back D-Mok, bringing back Jinzo is just very strong. I do think it's A tier. I don't think it's S tier. It's like a really specific card that you can only play in certain decks. So for that, I'll put it in. A tier. All right, so now we got another Reasoning Gate card. So many Reasoning Gate cards on this list. Defusion. I think this card is absolutely insane. Just because bringing back up to 5 monsters is broken, and it's not a trap card. This is a spell card, so you can do it right away as soon as you draw it. The only downside is that you do have to pay 2,000 life points, which is a bit of a hefty cost, but not enough to make it a bad card, because most of the time you are going to be at more than 2,000 life points, so it's not too big of a deal. And also, the other downside is that it does revive your opponent's banished monsters as well. But sometimes that's not even going to be a downside, because let's say, for example, your opponent only has like 1 monster and it's a very weak monster, and you have something like Air Knight. You're totally fine with bringing back that monster because you're going to do piercing damage anyway. And yeah, I think the card's absolutely nuts. I'm putting it in A tier, but like at the top of A tier. Yeah, hot take. I think it's actually better than Snatch Steal. Alright. Next up is Scapegoat. Scapegoat is obviously played in GOAT decks. The name is GOAT Control, so of course you're going to be playing Scapegoats. So this card is used with Metamorphosis and Creature Swap to try to bring out fusions and steal opponents' monsters and give them a token. You know, it's a really good strategy, but at the same time, I do think that it's a bit slow and outdated. GOAT decks can still top, they can still win, don't get me wrong, but you do have to be a lot better with the deck. You have to know the ins and outs of it, and At the same time, it does have to be your day. Like, you do have to draw a bit nice. And I think it's fine. I think if you're gonna play this deck, you can do well. But I still don't think it's amazing. I think it's at the bottom of A tier, I'm gonna say. Yeah, bottom of A tier. Alright, so next up we have Smashing Ground. Smashing Ground is almost never played in like Turbo or Control or even Burn, really. The only deck that really plays this card for some reason is aggro decks like Warrior or Earth Aggro. I guess because, you know, they need to clear the way to summon, attack, get their effects. So that does make sense. But at the same time, I don't think it's a very good card because it is very limited on what it can do. You can only hit face-up monsters. It's not like a quick play spell or anything like that, so it is very slow as well. Yeah, I think it's C tier. Alright, so next is Card Destruction. So Card D, if you guys know my opinion on Card D, you already know that I think it is very overrated. Because in the Turbo Mirror, for example, this card is very bad going second. Once your opponent already gets their Thunder Dragons and their +2 with Thunder Dragons, and if you activate Card D, you're giving them free cards basically. And there's also a chance that they can have Night Assailant or Sinister, and you're also putting Light and Darks in their grave. Also, there's a chance that you won't even draw your own Thunder Dragons or Sinisters or Night Assailants, and you have to wait to be able to fire this card off. Like, so that's another reason why I think even in the Warrior matchup, it's really bad because if, like I said, if you don't open up like Thunders, Sinisters, Night Assailants, you're gonna have to fire this thing off right away in the Warrior matchup because Warrior players don't give you time. They're very aggressive. If you hold this card for too long, they're just gonna rip it with like Donzalug. They're gonna go Blade Knight. They're gonna go Kaiku, set all these cards. They're gonna go Dust Shoot, send back your Night Assailants, your Sinisters, and now your card D is absolutely trash. So I think the card is very overrated. I'm gonna go ahead and put it at the top of B tier. Another hot take, I know, but at best I can only put it up here, like the bottom of A tier. But just because this is my opinion and my list, I'm gonna put it here. Feel free to disagree. Alright, so next up is Creature Swap. Creature Swap, like I mentioned earlier, is a card that combos with Scapegoat. It combos in Go Control decks. And the card's really nice, but with that being said, it's very bad against cards like Regeki Break, Wind Blast, or Ring of Destruction because, you know, if your opponent chains to it and you don't have like a Scapegoat, the card is going to be terrible because you're going to go neg 1. Also, if you're playing a mirror match, this card is absolutely abysmal. Like, if they chain their own Scapegoats, now you're just giving them a token and they're giving you a token back. You basically did almost nothing. So it can be nice, but at the same time, it's very situational. So I'm going to put it at the bottom of B tier. Alright, so next up is Book of Moon. So Book of Moon is a card that has been falling out of favor lately in a lot of decks, like especially Chaos Turbo. Back in the day, during like the actual GOAT format and even the GOAT revival days in like 2012, Book of Moon was a card that was basically considered a staple. Like, you were kind of crazy if you weren't playing Book. But nowadays, it's totally fine to cut Book. Like, if you think about it, if you're playing from behind, Book of Moon is usually going to be a neg 1. And Yeah, it's actually very bad if you're playing from behind. Obviously, when you're winning, the card is fantastic. You're able to protect a lot of good stuff like BLS, sorcerers, and you can keep your momentum, you can keep your lead. So if you're winning, Book of Moon is like at the top of A tier. But if you're losing, Book of Moon is like a C tier card. So to be fair, I'll just put it in B tier, somewhere around the middle of it, because Book of Moon is a card that just really depends on the game state. So I think it's B tier. Alright, so next up is gonna be Monster Gate. So Monster Gate is it's played in Reasoning Gate basically, and you just need to tribute any monster. It can even be tokens. You can steal your opponent's monsters and use theirs as the material for it. And similar to Reasoning, it's very specific. Like you can't just play it in any deck because it's really bad in any other deck besides Reasoning Gate. But when it does resolve, it's absolutely insane. The one upside that it has that Reasoning doesn't have is that your opponent can't guess it right ever, because they're not gonna be able to guess it. The card's gonna resolve no matter what, as long as the card is not negated with like Solemn. So I think it is better than Reasoning for that fact, but I can't put it much higher than Reasoning on the tier list, so it's still gonna be a B tier card. I'll say like right here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the tier list that I have. Basically, give or take my opinions. Maybe I can probably switch a few cards here and there if I actually take the time to look at this again in the future. But yeah, that's what I have for now. Feel free to disagree if you want. Everyone has their own opinions. With that being said, please make sure to like and subscribe if you like this type of content. This is Ghost Rider 15 signing out.